I'm Coach Tarek.
And I'm Vanessa.
We are your movement experts, and we are here to educate health and fitness professionals with the tools to create real change for and within the industry. I just had an insightful conversation with the Battling Ropes founder, John Brookfield. I've known John for a number of years. I've gone to visit him and trained under him in his place in North Carolina. In this episode in particular, I think what is staggering is that his longevity, his ability to adapt, his ability to evolve and not really stay stagnant. At 65 years old, he feels stronger and healthier than he was 10 years ago, for example. And for him, it's about evolving. It's about exploring our capacity to be able to really push the boundaries for health, not just from a physical perspective, but from a mental and certainly a spiritual perspective too. There's that dimension that is important to him, and he talks about his faith inspiring him to really take the visions that he believes comes from God, to then be able to formulate those into concepts that the everyday person like you and I can take up. And it's quite fascinating to learn from his story and to understand how he's adapted, not just as an educator, but adapted and evolved himself to become stronger, better than he was. And at 65, it's a very inspirational talk. So I really encourage you listeners to really understand the aspect of longevity. And we really touch on that without needing to dive into it in this conversation. Now he's really focusing in on his breath training and his new app. And again, we touch on that a little bit and the importance of incorporating breath work for longevity and ultimate health. Enjoy the great conversation that I've had with John Brookfield. Check out FTI's latest offer, which is 15% off of any of our online courses. Simply go to www.functionaltraininginstitute.com and input PDM15 at cart checkout. John, welcome to the Purpose Driven Movement podcast.
Thanks, Tarek. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, much appreciated. I've known you for a number of years, John. We've known each other for, I think, at least a decade, if not longer. And I had the privilege of training with you at your home on 2 occasions. And I remember distinctly on the first occasion, like I couldn't even hold my luggage when I was leaving because of all of the strenuous training that you took me through. And of course, the whole thing you're known for, at least over the years, 2 things really. And then, you defined as much more than that. Your Strongman feats and the creation of the battling rope system. So maybe would you like to indulge the audience a little bit about, who you are and, a little bit about your Strongman and battling ropes background?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's kind of interesting because a lot of people know me just for kind of like the Strongman background and didn't realize I was the one that created the ropes. And, a lot of people that knew, I was the rope creator, but also did the Strongman feat. So long story short, my father played professional basketball for about 12 years in the NBA in the U.S. here. So I had a background in sports and stuff like that. And then when I was about 16 years old, Tarek, I was a good athlete, but probably the weakest part of my body was my hands. When I was about 16, 17, I had a goal to how to develop the strongest grip in the world. And that's how I got into the Strongman feats. And I'm 65 years old now, and I can still bend the horseshoes, the nails, and rip the cards as good as I could when I was 25 or 35.
How have you sustained that incredible level of strength from your younger years up until now? What may be the secrets?
It's definitely God God says he'll renew your youth like the eagles. Is definitely tapping into the strength and the wisdom of the Lord. And I can do things now. I got to be smarter now, like, at 65. But I used to weigh as much as 280. I weigh about 212 this morning. But I've intentionally got my weight down. But, I eat a little bit better. Like if I'm going to lift a heavy weight off the ground, I just pay attention to where my feet are better. So I can do whatever I could do then, but I just got to be have a little bit more wisdom. I believe anybody can actually get better with time. I mean, kind of people now, even science kind of tells you go downhill, but I believe just the opposite. I believe if you take care of yourself and be careful about not getting injured, I think you can get better as you get older. You just have to be a little bit wiser how you do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, it really does. And some of those, let's call them quote unquote secrets of longevity. Can you touch on those a little bit as to, from your own journey, but also what's been revealed through maybe people you've worked with in terms of the recipe for longevity?
I think it's just more of a mindset, to be honest with you, Tarek. I mean, there's no set answer. Like I said, I just kind of tapped into trust in the Lord and His Word, how He renews your youth like the eagles. And I stay active every day. I try to do about 2 hours of a pretty solid activity every day. Maybe not just a set workout. And the other day, you'll get a kick out of this. I never was a person that actually worked with a lot of pull-ups, but I'm 65 and I weigh, like I said, about 212, 213 this morning. I can do 5 or 6 one-arm pull-ups on either arm, but I didn't have a background doing that. But I think it's mindset. I think you just stay active, and every day you try to have a little bit of a goal and maybe make yourself a little bit better each day, but don't let it stress you out. And combining also, I think the really key is people know me for the battling ropes and the strength feats, but when I had trained, not one time I can remember ever, Tarek, that I ever go to a maximum lift. I never tried to do as much as I could lift on any kind of lift. It was more work capacity, just kind of sustaining, where you might do something for an hour and you're as strong at the end as when you start.
Yeah, something that I learned from you around that work capacity, whether it's with a battling rope or with the barrels training or lugging chains or whatever it could be. Can you talk more about what defines work capacity?
Yeah, basically, when I do most of my training, I might take a particular drill or exercise and, instead of like doing, a lot of people do the circus rounds in intervals, which is really, really good. Don't get me wrong, but they definitely burn fat. There's definitely some advantages to doing that. But I think you need to combine also maybe taking, like, let's say you might pick one drill and maybe try to do it for a whole hour, a safe drill. And what you're doing when you do that, so let's say we're dragging chains for an hour. What that actually does, it teaches you as things start to get tough, not give up. So you kind of stay on task and keep moving through that difficulty and try to relax under the distress. And so you're developing more of a lactic acid threshold, but more of a mental capacity too. Because if you're always doing circuits, rounds, and intervals, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking those, they're good. But see, let's say we do 45 seconds of kettlebell swings, and then 45 seconds of box jumps, and maybe 45 seconds of push-ups or something. It doesn't really matter. See, as you're doing that first 45 seconds of kettlebell swings, before it really starts getting tough on your mind and body, you get the change to go do something else. So you're kind of letting yourself off the hook each time, but real life doesn't let you off the hook. So I believe like kind of sustaining and working through the difficulty and kind of relax during the distress. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I've had good fortune to experience that under your guidance with the 20 minutes on the ropes and plus 1 mile rope pulls and what have you. And that definitely got me focused on that one thing and kind of got me into that flow state very quickly. It didn't happen without training, of course. There was necessary training put into it. But I think what you're getting at there is it's this flow effect, and sort of you build this resilience and you get this tapping into these deeper levels of the mind, right? Which I think is pretty powerful. It's another level or understanding of physical movement, isn't it? And it actually transcends that. You and I have had many wonderful conversations on the power of the mind and the spirit to really kind of fulfill what really a human being is. And I think the audience gets that. And of course, there's plenty of ways to kind of manipulate training. And one of those is just bash out 20, 30 minutes of one activity. And like you said, rather than beat your body down, you kind of build the body up, you build your resilience up. And that's sort of been my experience, John, of building that threshold, as you put it earlier, withstanding.
Well, you see, when you want to combine kind of like your athletic, your sport and your fitness with kind of like a traditional, let's say you have a guy that's going out, he's a farm worker, he's working out in the field for 12 hours a day, or a construction site. A lot of those guys, they don't know what a bench press is, hardly even know what a push-up is, you know what I mean? But they know they're going to be out there for 10 to 12 hours in the hot sun, lifting bags or carrying back roofing materials or something. So you want to kind of combine your fitness and your functional training, just whole time work capacity, basically. So if you can combine those two, you're ahead of the game. And so when that guy he gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning, Tarek, and he goes out to the field, or he's working on a roof or construction site, it might be 100 degrees out there. He knows he's going to be out there for 10 or 12 hours. So his mindset's already, I don't know how bad it's going to be, but I'm going to be out there for 10 or 12 hours. I'm going to make the best of it. So he already goes in with the right attitude. And so you want to relax under the storm, like the old famous story, like when the apostles and Jesus, they were going across the sea, Jesus was sleeping during the storm. The reason he was sleeping during the storm, to him, there was no storm, basically. So your mindset wants to be relaxed under the stress where there really is no distress. And that's where your background and proper breathing and things like that come in. And just, it's not something you can develop overnight, but it's something you can definitely develop quicker than people think they could.
It's a great analogy you use there, yeah.
You don't want to use any more activity than you have to. Like if you're going to bend over to pick up a 300-pound barbell, you don't want to lift it like you're lifting a 600-pound barbell. I mean, you want to use enough energy and strength to lift 300 pounds, but you don't want to use excess energy to accomplish a task. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does, yeah. It's a very intriguing point, and one that you did touch on, though, and we'll segue nicely into, is intentional breathing. And this has become really a focal point for you over the last several months, if not over a year. Or can you tell us a little bit more about your voyage, if you like, into the world of intentional breathing and what that is really?
Well, I guess for the last couple of years, I've really been, and this is pretty God-given. I'm obviously familiar with a lot of the other breathing gurus, the different breathing techniques, and certainly nothing against those. And anybody that can teach people being awareness of their breath, it's always going to be very, very good. But over the last couple of years, I've developed a system basically that anybody from a world-class athlete can use, from an Olympic gold medalist to an 80-year-old woman with COPD or someone with stress disorders. It's called Rise Plus Restore, the system. I'm going to be introducing in 4 or 5 weeks as a special app and breathing system. So Rise Plus Restore. So basically it starts by decompressing the spine and the major organs. So once you can start decompressing your spine and your major organs, your whole body can work in divine or optimal health. And then from there, kind of you create more breathing space. So like I said, and you control all your breathing muscles. And like I said, then it moves into what I call 4 winds breathing, where you can direct your breath in any part of your body. But the cool thing about it, Tarek, it's something that can be used by anybody. It doesn't have to be, it's definitely something a great athlete can greatly help them, but anybody is, because let's be honest with you, breathing is not a niche market. You know what I mean? We all don't want to be a NASCAR driver or play in the NFL, but chances are if you can hear our voice or touch our skin or see us, you're probably breathing. So breathing is not a niche market.
Yeah, very interesting point. And can you talk a little bit more about how it's helped you specifically, through your journey of fitness and health and so on?
Well, one thing I'll give each person here a very special tip, and I'll kind of back this with science, with common sense. And here again, all kinds of breathing gurus have all types of breathing techniques, and they're all good to make people conscious of your breath. But it's very, very important to be able to breathe in through your nose and out through your nose, okay? In God's word, it says very, very clearly, he breathed life into man's nostrils. He didn't have to say that. He could have said, I breathe life into man. But he said, I breathe life into man's nostrils. And also he said, I blew them away with the breath of my nostrils. And also, so science has proven for the last 5 or 6, 10 years, nitric oxide. Years ago, they didn't even talk about nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the number one thing in your body that creates circulation. Okay, so when nitric oxide is flowing, basically what it does, it relaxes but expands your blood vessels, your whole capillary system. So basically, when you're having nitric oxide, it expands your capillaries, your arteries, your whole circulatory system, which is huge, right? You got better circulation. And the number one way to do that, there is supplements like beetroot and stuff like that, which is good. But the number one way they know now to decrease nitric oxide is breathe through your nose, in through your nose and out through your nose. And that also circulation, but also relaxes your body. Because when you're breathing in and out through your nose, basically your nervous system is telling everything, the rest of your body, everything is okay. You see what I mean? So you're in a very alert state because your blood flow is good, but also you're in a very, very relaxed state, which is huge. So the foundation, my breathing system, that I got, Rise Restore, it continues that there's no cap. You can never master it. It just keeps going to different levels safely, but the foundation is teaching people how to breathe properly where you can move on.
And what might that look like, that foundation? Can you give an example, just a little bit of a teaser of your system?
Well, here's what's interesting, because you asked me before, Tarek, like years ago, here again, I'm 65, and probably only till I was 63, I would do all these strength feats and stuff we're talking about. I never really paid attention to my breath. Most of the time, I probably breathed through my mouth. I would say 90% of the time, I didn't pay attention. But only these last couple of years, I've been paying attention to all nasal breathing, okay? And also, when you're doing the nasal breathing, if you have your tongue to the roof of your mouth, just very relaxed, get in the habit of doing that. And here again, this is backed by science, it's not just me talking. When your tongue is resting on the roof of your mouth, it opens your airways up by far the most. So that's going to create more nitric oxide. So this is not very scientific, it's actually kindergarten, but it's just when you're doing that, your whole circulatory system works better. So now if I'm running or cycling full blast, or I do like a lot of heavy, like hill climbing and rock climbing and stuff where I'm going straight up. Now before I could never breathe through my nose the whole time. It would be impossible for me. But now I can always breathe in and out through my nose, no matter how hard it gets. And so 2 reasons: you're getting more circulation, and also your body is relaxed as well. But it does take a little time, but it's definitely worth the effort.
And Have you found, since you've deployed the nasal breathing in the last sort of 2 odd years, if you will, have you found that your work capacity and doing these activities becoming, but maybe not effortless, but do you feel like it's a lot more in sync for you? Well, that may be the word.
Oh, yeah, very, very much so. And of course, you remember it's been a while since we've actually seen one another. My waist, I'm just guessing, my waist was probably maybe 38 or 40. It's actually 31 now, basically. Like I said, I went from 280 or 260 to about 212, 213. And not everything. I've used some different types of fasting and stuff like that. But a lot of this is from this breathing, because when my body started to decompress the spine, my waist, it's also very, very good for lean muscle mass. So somebody could get a little bit heavier, a little bit lighter, but it definitely enables you to control all your breathing muscles plus all your abdominal muscles, basically, and really have great control of your core as well. Because when you're doing this breathing, the techniques that I developed, I mean, it's more breathing, and it helps your posture, but also greatly develops your core muscles. Like now I can actually, I'm not saying like in the mouth, I can control each one of my intercostals at each side of my body. I can actually, with the muscle control, I can actually light it in any intercostal on either side. And I get a little bit of that into the advanced method of the breathing. Does somebody have to learn that? Of course not. But my point is there's no cap on the training. You get that much muscle control with your breath.
And from what you've understood now, and perhaps are continuing to understand, what would be the kind of expectation for someone to get these benefits of undertaking a certain routine per day, for example, of this breath routine?
Most of our listeners here are trainers, I'm assuming, but the thing is that it encompasses everybody, because most of the people I'm talking to are trainers or athletes, but they work with the general population. You see what I mean? So with people with issues, so we're encompassing everybody in here. But once you can start them with the proper breathing, once they get used to the breath work, I do some breath work workouts and stuff, but I don't emphasize too much on it. I do a little bit, but see, then you want to walk around all day long with your proper breathing. I mean, we can't walk around in a push-up position all day, but because we're breathing all day long and all night, after a little bit of time of learning this stuff, you're basically you're living in that. And even once you get used to doing it with the nasal breathing, most likely when you sleep at night, because your nervous system and your body is so used to that type of breathing, you're probably going to sustain that pretty much all night long as well. And so when we're able to do that, we combat a lot of stress. And of course, stress causes almost all disease, they say, maybe all of it, but almost all disease. So it's very, very stress relieving too on your nervous system. One important thing, now think about this, I'm not sure, I live in the U.S. and I'm just using a Ford Mustang. For example, I'm assuming most listeners know what a Ford Mustang is, but let's say you're going down the interstate or the highway, or the freeway, wherever you're living, and you're going 80 miles an hour, okay? And then when you're breathing in through your nose, in through your nose, out through your nose, that Ford Mustang is keeping the same speed, okay? But all of a sudden, when you're breathing in through your nose and then you breathe out through your mouth, you lose that nitric oxide flow just for a second. It stops and starts. So it'd be like driving that car on the interstate or riding the clutch. You got a really good flow of movement, and then all of a sudden you let off the gas. And that's basically what happens when you're breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. We don't want to lose the flow of nitric oxide. Now, when we're training, sometimes getting used to it, a lot of people, they're going to have to breathe through their mouth, and that's okay. You know what I mean? As they're getting used, of course they can't. It's not that big a deal, but you want to slowly but surely get used to always breathing in through your nose, out through your nose.
Yeah, I was going to say in instances where there's...
And God made that very, very clear in his word, by the way, too. It's not something I just fabricated.
No, of course. And there are instances, however, when the client or the athlete is performing at these high intensities. So it's perhaps difficult to sustain nasal breathing throughout.
Yeah, somebody can do it easier than they think. And hey, you got to remember, so let's say you're a rugby player or a football player or wrestler. See, once again, when your nitric oxide is flowing, right, you have more circulation, right? So you're less likely to get hurt as well. So let's say you get hit in the side or slammed down on the mat, or basically you get a little bit out of alignment with your running or something. The more circulation you have during the time of that impact, the less likely you're going to get hurt. So a lot of it just kind of goes back to good old common sense as well. The more circulation we have, the less likely we're going to get hurt, the better our performance is. But when we're creating circulation and then losing it, like riding the clutch or the gas all the time, we're much more prone to not perform as good or get hurt. Does that make sense, Tarek?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
It's a little bit different talking. It's actually very elementary what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it creates that suppleness that most people need, especially as we start aging, that tissue, the stiffness and of the joints. And as you said, that viscosity is reduced. But it just sounds like this real, as you put it, a simple practice, but being intentional is the key, isn't it? We could say it's simple, But can you give us an example of your intentionality of breathing in your everyday walk of life?
Yes, and one thing I'll mention about, because I don't want to forget this, is very, very important. Like I said, I'm 65 and God's blessed me, I've never had an injury, believe it or not, little aches and pains, but I intentionally, about 6 months ago, Tarek, I went back and I had my chiropractors do a x-ray on my lumbar spine as well as my thoracic, just for the hay of it. And I had two different chiropractors look at it, not even conferring with one another. And I asked them both, I said, if you didn't know who I was, well, how old do you think that spine is? Guess what they said? And one of them said, I would think that spine is a 30-year-old, and the other person said in their 30s. Now, that's not a boast. My point is, when they went back and looked at x-rays 7 years ago or 8 years ago, my spine is much better now at 65 than it was, 5, 7, 10 years ago. But it's because of this breathing decompressing the spine. See what I mean? So the more we can decompress that, because, the spinal column, as most people know, it sends messages back and forth from the brain, back and forth. So when our spinal column is compressed with life, basically, and younger people are like that as well, just from different things, the way they sit, the more we're decompressed in the spine and the organs can work, and the whole body works optimally. But that's very, very interesting there, I thought.
Yeah, it really is. And the system itself, Rise and Restore, is a fairly simple system to grasp for the trainer or even the general population, if you will. Can anyone just access it and apply it quite easily?
Yeah, it is. And when someone gets the app, basically, for the first couple modules, I think right now I've got like 17 modules, so it's very, very extensive. But the app will be continuing, just an ongoing when somebody gets it. But here's what happens, basically. So I start somebody out with the foundation of breathing, which is the nasal breathing. I kind of work them into how to do that if they're having a hard time with it. There's a lot of people say, well, they have allergies or a deviated septum or different, they got, a lot of like sinus issues. But here's the cool thing, and I will answer your question, but this is important as well. So let's say somebody has a deviated septum or they're prone to allergies and stuff like that, where they get a lot of buildup, mucus buildup, right? So when we're breathing through our nose, so picture moving a river or a stream, Tarek, okay? If you have a stream out here with a bunch of logs and, all kinds of debris and, rot and stuff in it, if that water's not moving fluently, it keeps getting more. But the more flow of water, like a fast-moving stream, pushes debris out, right? So when we're breathing through our mouth, there's no way for that to unclog. But the more nasal breathing we have, that circulation of that air going up and through the oxygen, with the nitric oxide, it's going to move that stuff out of there. So sometimes if I wake up, I'm a little stopped up or something like that, when I'm going out on my bike or something, it'll move it out because you're creating more space in your whole nasal canals and passages as well. But in the app and the system, basically, I teach someone the foundation of breathing. And then I basically start them with some basic breaths to start kind of decompressing and really getting a feel of their rib cage and their diaphragm. And what I'm actually doing, and I mentioned it, I'm actually teaching them a little bit of muscle control where they can go from one breath to the other. So they're actually learning a little bit of muscle control, which is enabling them to move higher into the system where they can continue to decompress, then have the muscle control where they can actually move their breathing muscles around.
Yeah, terrific. And what was the big shift? If we go back.
And also with that type of breathing, and I got some neuroscientists right now doing some, as we speak, this is way above my head part. I'm not very scientific. You're much smarter than me, I can guarantee you. But they're doing some testing on my brain with these unique breaths. And what they're basically starting to find that activates the left brain, right brain in a very unique way. Because your breath is everything. It's not just, we walk around breathing or we're trying to breathe better for sports. If you think about it, it's the number one thing that sustains life.
Yeah, synchronizes your left and right hemispheres.
But yeah, it's a combination of a very unique breathing with muscle control. We can get that muscle control. There's no limit of what we can do. So most people's breathing, even younger people, a lot of the trainers I'm talking to are the same. It's like if you're trying to water your lawn and you have that kink twisted garden hose that gets hooked onto bushes and the rocks. And so we take this kink twisted garden hose and unkink it, but we continue to open it into a wide open fire hose. Because the system greatly also shows you people how to open up your thoracic and your shoulders and chest. Like I'm probably twice as flexible now, Tarek, as when you were here, like in my shoulders and my chest. And the system teaches that as well. So it just teaches you how to keep creating more breathing space, expanding your territory to be able to breathe better. And then your lungs can keep getting stronger and stronger and expanding. So I train the people's lungs and breathing muscles like a power lifter would basically train powerlifting. There's no limit to this. We don't just teach people how to breathe good, which most systems do, and that's great. That's very good. But I keep training the breathing muscles to get stronger and stronger, more endurance, and just the sky's the limit, basically.
Yeah, I find that's quite staggering that in such a fairly short space of time, you've been able to transform yourself from the inside out, by the sounds of it, quite literally, sort of allowing that blood flow. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There's a lot of cueing and kind of some basic stuff on the app that'll teach people how to kind of follow along, where they'll be able to move into the system pretty easily. It's not rocket science. I kind of like ease people into it. But everything's very, very safe. And like I said, a great athlete can use it, but so can a client that your trainers work with that might be 80 years old or 50 years old that have health issues. It's all very, very safe.
Yeah, brilliant. And I was going to ask you that, what would be one thing that you'd suggest for the listener to kind of really focus on for their health or fitness journey? What would be the one thing that you'd recommend?
Well, like I said, I got to give all the credit to my Lord Jesus Christ. Basically, I made him Lord and Savior years ago, but I actually looked through the Bible, like all these systems I've created in the past, and I basically just seek the Lord on them. Just like when you asked about the battling ropes years ago, you probably remember this story, but people always ask me, how did I create the battling ropes? And I was doing these truck pulling records, and I basically just prayed. I said, Lord, would you reveal to me the best way for someone to sustain physically and mentally? And within about an hour, the Lord took me to the flow of water, basically like water coming into the shore or fast moving river. So I started with the basic ropes, the basic concept. There's 7 techniques or concepts rather, but I started mimicking the flow of water. And that's where that came from. The Lord revealed that to me.
So you had a powerful, powerful vision, and then you followed that through. It's tremendous. And it seems that you had this same type of epiphany, if you will, about intentional breathing, and it's just transformed you over the last 2 years. And I think what's encouraging for me, John, is that those who are listening, age isn't a barrier, quite clearly. Your health is improved drastically as a result of this intentional breathing. Your flexibility and your general movement, you've said, is improved drastically. I just find that quite staggering and incredible that someone like yourself, you keep pushing the boundaries, but it's not inaccessible. Like, as you said, it's accessible to anyone.
I think the 3 most important things, like for sustaining health, and whether we're talking about fitness or just longevity, and people will always put diet first. I actually put diet third, by the way. And I'll tell you the first 2. Now, don't get me wrong, diet is important, but the first is your breathing. And I truly believe, Tarek, the second one is your feet, okay? Is keeping your feet strong and mobile and balanced. Because if you look at most people, basically in pretty much every country, basically, like over here in the U.S., I mean, they'll put people in these big clunky shoes, like Herman Munster would wear in that old show. And so they lose control with your feet. And then the next thing they do, then their whole spine gets compressed. They start looking down. But you probably know that there's more nerves in the bottom of your feet than any place else in your body. So like when you're barefoot as much as possible, try to be barefoot as much as possible in your house, or even working in the yard or whatever you do, work up to it. But the nerves in the bottom of your feet are communicating with your spine and everything. So breathing is the most important thing because we do it all the time. And then I believe your feet are the second. If you can keep your feet strong and healthy and mobile, huge for longevity. And diet's important. Once again, it's important, but I think it's third.
With going back to your feet, you mean more barefoot? Is that what you're getting at? To get out of those shoes and earth, if you like?
Yeah, I very rarely any shoes. I'll work in the yard all day long with no shoes on. Basically like, walking and stuff like that. Or like people, look at, obviously your people are out, they're working, they're walking in town. You just wear some good 0 drop shoes, flat shoes with, but you have to kind of work into it if you're a little bit older. I mean, it takes a little while to develop your foot strength. But if you look, just common sense, Tarek, if you look at most shoes in the U.S. particularly, but I'm sure everywhere, the back heel is jacked up, right? There's a little bit of a lift in the back, like this. So it all automatically puts like you're standing on a hill, your spine is automatically out of line with that back up. And then the arch supports, and I'm not jamming those things, don't get me wrong. I mean, but what they support your arch. So when you're supporting something, what happens? The arch doesn't have to work. So your arch is going to naturally get weaker. I mean, if 15 of us are out working on a construction site, what's going to happen? Well, probably none of us are going to work because there's a bunch of us. But if there's just a couple of us, we're going to work. So when our archers will come back, but when you have an arch support all the time, it doesn't have to work. It just falls. And then, but you lose a kind of connection with your nervous system that sends messages throughout your body. But your feet are very, very important.
Yeah, but I would totally agree. I had a 10-year journey of really going barefoot primarily. And on the odd occasion when I do wear shoes, my feet cry out. So I need to free them up quickly. But it's interesting because I've had, flat feet just genetically. And, I've been able to, through barefoot work and just walking around barefoot in the garden or whatever, I've actually strengthened that foot and the arch has gotten a little bit more pronounced. So you're right, though. It's intentional. It's intentionality again, intentionality in where your foot's placed. And you talk about ground force reaction reaction when we're using the battling rope. It's just night and day when you take off those shoes and you perform bullwhip or any type of movement for that matter, a kettlebell swing, and you earth and you get those feet anchored in it, it definitely creates more of a connectivity. And of course, you get an uptake of all those electrons and all of the good stuff from the earth.
One little tip I'll give that you'll get a kick out of, and basically just if you want to kind of strengthen your feet and understand your nervous system, maybe make like a little box of like little smooth rocks or gravel and basically just stand in that. Like when you're doing some exercises, because when you're standing in those, like, little stones, like you use a stone in the sling, and you're standing in those, it's pushing on all different parts of your feet. And basically it's making your whole body fire correctly. So just by doing that, you'll see just how much signals are going back and forth from your brain with that standing in gravel or just those small, smooth stones. It really lights your whole feet up like that.
Yeah, it's a great little tip. It's so simple, but that's a great tip. And so you've got, no, I was just going to recap and I'll just sort of say that and I won't steal the limelight. But you've got the intentional breathing, the footwork, if you like, your barefoot type of activities. And then thirdly, your nutrition. And then, of course, you layer on movement. I just wanted to recap that. That's very wise. So go on, John.
Purpose-driven movement, right? So just staying active all the time, regardless of your situation. Some people are very fit, some people struggle with their health, but just being active and doing stuff every day. But here's something maybe nobody here knows. I mean, most doctors don't know this. I mean, you can pull this up on Google, but I spoke to a bunch of doctors that didn't even know this. Now, babies, infants, about the first 4 or 5 months of their life, they can't breathe through their mouth until they're about 4 or 5 months. So see, that's how God created them. See, they can only breathe through their nose. They can't breathe through their mouth. Now, somebody might say, well, John, why don't babies suffocate and die? What if they get stopped up, which they do? But when they're breathing through the nose, now they got that flow of oxygen just like we would in a river, see, and it can push that stuff out. But just very, very interesting. I wanted to share with you that probably maybe nobody here knows that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I didn't quite know that.
And maybe you did, but you probably didn't. Maybe you did, but
no, that's a good one to just think about.
My point is, I don't think God would have created a human being like that without being able. That's obviously telling you something.
Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting going back to that sort of fetal development, and it's always clues, you're right, clues into that, wonderful fetus that was created and now is just developing into this human being. And we go wayward perhaps, and then we need to find our path again. And that's certainly what you've been an example of, John, to me, and many of you, the people who follow you and look up to you, have done. And it's inspiring for me to see you as a mentor and a friend, someone who's continuing to push the boundaries of what really health is, into your 60s now. And I could imagine that won't slow you down,
Well, I said 65 and, like I said, I actually bent some steel sculptures yesterday with my hands like I used to do. And I still do those. Different sizes and stuff like that. So it's just a matter of just staying active and staying at it and keeping the right attitude.
That's like a best souvenir. So next time I come, John, to visit, I'm going to request one of those and you can just form it into any type of shape. But that's, I remember you sharing that many years ago, and it's incredible to have you on this show, and I do hope that the guests got some great insights, through your stories and of course your new app, which will be coming out very soon on the whole system of breathing. So we look forward to that. That'll be in the show notes, folks. So there'll be links to finding out more about John Brookfield as well as the app. And I understand that there's a free battling rope course, which is quite generous when someone subscribes to that app. So we'll share more of that and about that in the show notes, and you'll hopefully discover more about the great man, John Brookfield. So John, thanks for featuring on this podcast once again.
Well, I appreciate it, Tarek. Thank you so much for having me. Look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of our podcast community. We work hard to create content that we hope you enjoy and find valuable. If you haven't already, we would be honored if you would consider subscribing and following us on your favorite platform. That way, you'll never miss an episode and you'll always be the first to know when new episodes are released. We truly appreciate your support, and we can't wait to continue to grow and connect with you through our podcast.